Hello, everyone. Welcome back to my channel, Mormonism with the Murph, where Latter-day Saint explores the church's history and the church's truth claims. Today's episode is going to be about should we research church history? This is probably quite a controversial one, as for many of us, we were probably cautioned growing up to not look at anything that was anti-Mormon literature, anything that's critical or antagonistic towards the church, because it might destroy your testimony, and that these things are lies, and that we shouldn't listen to them. This is one that I have some strong feelings about because I never went looking for anything critical of the church. I never really researched outside of sort of scriptures and lesson manuals and conference talks. Whenever I encountered things in church history that I thought, oh, this must be a complete lie, I found out that some of it was factual information, and a lot of what is considered anti-Mormon literature is really critical conclusions or interpretations, sometimes spin, but most of the time is derived from a historical source or some sort of a historical fact. And in the past, there's maybe been members of the church, leaders, family members who have cautioned or heavily discouraged people that you shouldn't research, you shouldn't be looking up things on the internet about the church. That's not how you're going to find out truth. And I'm going to share some quotes and some things that I think might be interesting. So this comes from a talk by Elder Boyd K. Packer, who was an apostle. This was on the 22nd of August, 1981. It was an address to religious educators at a symposium on the Doctrine and Covenants at Brigham Young University. So it was to religious professors and educators. And the title of the talk is "The Mantle is Far, Far Greater Than the Intellect." And there's part of his talk where he says that there is a temptation for the writer or the teacher of church history to want to tell everything, whether it is worthy or faith promoting or not. Some things that are true are not very useful. And in this talk, Elder Packer, he comes from the position that this is the Lord's true church. The church is true. We're led and guided by prophets. We have revelation, and that religious professors or historians should be hesitant to disclose things in the church's history that may harm somebody's faith, and that we should teach a very faith promoting narrative. And that was the church history that I grew up with. The Joseph Smith movie, that Joseph Smith was next to Jesus in righteousness, that he was always doing God's will and being persecuted. And the church in recent years, they have made steps towards being more transparent, towards being more open about their history, with the Gospel Topics essay, the Joseph Smith Papers Project, the Saints volumes, where they discuss maybe some things that weren't known, maybe in the mainstream of the church, in the correlated seminary and institute lessons, such as, Joseph Smith's seer stone that he used to translate the Book of Mormon, not, the gold plates and the Urim and Thummim, and that he used the same stone in treasure digging and folk magic as a young man, or that Joseph Smith practiced polygamy and was married to approximately 34, 35 women. Some of them were sealed to other men, so had living husbands. Some of them were as young as 14. They're more open about the racism in the past in the church and the priesthood ban. And the church is trying to acknowledge these troubling things in church history. One, I think, because it's become so accessible with the internet, accessing this information, and that people are checking the sources and realizing that a lot of these things come from the history of the church or the Journal of Discourses, or even on the church's own website. So these things can't really be considered as just anti-Mormon lies. Yes, there can be some very critical websites or podcasts that can put a maybe critical spin or draw their own interpretation. But a lot of what is considered, anti-Mormon is really people who have, most of the time, drawn a conclusion, and it usually comes from some sort of a historical source or a historical fact. There's maybe nuance on the reliability of it, the ambiguity, the trustworthiness, but it's usually derived from some sort of a source from somewhere. And I just have to say that well, I understand his position. I remember, as a missionary, I always wanted my goal, my agenda was to bring people, closer to Christ, was to build their faith in Heavenly Father and in Jesus, and to try to help them to receive a spiritual testimony and to be baptized. And then you're only going to share the things which are faith promoting, the things which will build their faith, and you want to leave out anything that might seem messy or might put them off. But I have to say, I don't feel like this is being transparent. And I know for me, I want to know about the church's history, whether it's faith promoting or not, whether it's good, bad, ugly, because a lot of people can feel betrayed when they feel like they didn't know about Joseph Smith's polygamy, or they didn't know about some of the things that Brigham Young taught, or they didn't know about the Book of Abraham, and that Egyptologists have translated, fragments of the papyrus that's been found. It doesn't match Joseph Smith's translation. People can feel really betrayed when they feel like they've been in the church for years and years and decades and never heard any of these things and been devout members. No, I've been cautioned by people that, oh, don't go researching. You shouldn't be going on the internet. You shouldn't be listening to podcasts. You shouldn't be researching these things. And part of me thinks like, well, why? If the church is true, if it's what it claims to be, it can withhold research and investigation. It can stand up. And we're going to read some more quotes about this. But Elder Stephen Snow, who was a former the church historian, he acknowledged that I think in the past there was a tendency by the Mormon Church to keep a lot of the records closed, or at least not give access to information. But the world has changed in the last generation with the access to information on the internet. We can't continue that pattern. I think we need to continue to be more open. And I think that's good. There needs to be openness, transparency. If we hide things that might be controversial, people will feel betrayed. So it's important for people to know about the church's history, the faith promoting, and the things which are troubling and disturbing. So these are some quotes I really like about investigating the church. So this comes from Apostle Hugh B. Brown. We should be scientific, that is, open-minded, approaching new problems without prejudice, deferring a decision until all the facts are in. Because if you're only hearing one narrative or one half of the story, if you're only hearing part of the information, then you can't really make a well-informed decision based on all the evidence and all the information. And scientists, they are open-minded and they want to try to come to their own conclusions or their own theories based on all the information they can derive on something, and they're inquisitive. He also said, I admire men and women who have developed the questioning spirit, who are unafraid of new ideas as stepping stones to progress. We should, of course, respect the opinions of others, but we should also be unafraid to dissent if we are informed. Thoughts and expressions compete in the marketplace of thought, and in that competition, truth emerges triumphant. Only error fears freedom of expression. And I think this is, again, a really good quote, that we should not be afraid of new ideas or new information, science, scholarship, history, that we can become a lot more informed. There's many beliefs that maybe I had on maybe the literality of all scripture, or assumptions about prophets, which were either very simplistic or misinformed or just incorrect. And it really comes from a place of weakness if we do not want to enter into dialogue with those who have different beliefs. And it also, we can learn as well from other people. And there's also some quotes about blind faith, because some people would say, well, you just believe, you just accept it, just listen to what the prophets are saying, just have faith. This comes from the prophet Joseph F. Smith. He said, we talk of obedience, but do we require any man or woman to ignorantly obey the counsels that are given? Do the first presidency require it? No, never. So we should be using our brain. We should be questioning things. We should be thinking. God said to seek learning by study and also by faith. He's given us a rational brain to problem solve, to be logical and rational, and to also inquire spiritually as well, not just accept anything at face value, including what the leaders are saying, but to go to God and to use our own brain in the matter. This comes from Apostle Charles W. Penrose. He said, President Wilford Woodruff is a man of wisdom and experience, and we respect him, but we do not believe his personal views or utterances are revelations from God. And when thus saith the Lord comes from him, the saints investigate it. They do not shut their eyes and take it down like a pill. It's funny because I've heard opposite quotes, growing up in the church, like, if the prophet speaks, then that is the mind and will of God. He is the mouthpiece of the Lord, and you just need to accept it, that is coming from God. And what he's saying in this quote is, we should respect them, but if he declares something as a revelation from God, that we should investigate it, and we shouldn't just blindly accept it, that we should think about it, ponder on the matter, seek our own, spiritual answer. You don't just accept it at face value. And this is, again, going back to, being empowering and inquisitors of truth ourselves. There's a couple of quotes here that I love. This is from J. Reuben Clark, and it says, if we have the truth, it cannot be harmed by investigation. If we have not the truth, it ought to be harmed. I believe that's true. Ultimately, the truth will triumph, and we shouldn't have a fear-based approach and be super worried or cautious about people investigating or people researching, because if the church is true, it will withhold scrutiny and investigation. And if we don't have the truth, then it ought to be harmed. And that's why there's people who do attack the church and who are critics, and it's because they've come to the conclusion they do not believe the church is true. And that's why they're being critical. This comes from George Albert Smith. He says, if a faith will not bear to be investigated, if its preachers and professors are afraid to have it examined, their foundations must be very weak. I agree with this. If we're afraid for people to examine things in an intellectual, a scholarly way, a scientific way, and spiritual as well, then that's come from a place of weakness. We shouldn't be afraid of people investigating and research, and I think cautioning people not to do that. If it was any other aspect of life, you'd be kind of concerned if somebody wasn't diving in and examining things and figuring things out for themselves. One last quote, and I'm going to finish on this one. It's from Apostle James Talmage. He said, the man who cannot listen to an argument which opposes his views either has a weak position or is a weak defender of it. No opinion that cannot stand discussion or criticism is worth holding. And these are all, apostles and leaders of our church. And some of these quotes are so powerful that, we should be able to listen to arguments of people who have opposing views. That's one thing I'm trying to, model on this channel. And it's difficult. It's difficult when you talk to people who, don't share the same beliefs, or those who are critical of the church. But I think having dialogue with critics, or dialogue with those people who have different opposing views, it shows more weakness and more fear if you don't want to engage with them, in my opinion. And if you enter with an open mind, you can hold your position, you can have a respectful dialogue. But if you're not able to have a conversation, to have a dialogue, to listen to people's point of view, then your position must be quite a weak one to defend. And again, no opinion that cannot stand discussion or criticism is worth holding. The church has to be able to withhold people discussing it, withhold investigation, scrutiny, and even criticism. And if it can't, then it's a weak position to have. So should we, research, church history and the church's truth claims and examine and listen to what critics say? And absolutely, I am totally for that. I think it's very concerning for people to say, don't go look in those things. Should you be careful with your research? Certainly. Should you be checking your sources? Should you try to be balanced? Absolutely. Do I believe you should include the spiritual, include God in the process? Certainly, because the church's position would be ultimately it's by a spiritual revelation that you would receive a testimony, but that would include the analytical, scientific research, scholarship using your rational brain. I think those things are important. So interested to see what are your comments, what are your thoughts. Comment underneath if you've enjoyed this video. Give it a like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you on future videos coming soon. Take care.